So the first question comes from Boss, and they ask, do you think the original MGS, so the 1998 version, gets overlooked by newer fans because of the dated graphics?
Yes, I think it does. I think it's more accessible to people than, say, Twin Snakes. But if they had an option to play Twin Snakes or play Metal Gear Solid, they would probably play Twin Snakes.
Yeah.
And another reason why I say that is I have a cousin who I introduced the series to, and he loves it. He loves it like so much. And I was trying to explain to him like, yeah, he's like, the original game did not look as terrible as it does now.
Yeah.
And he didn't understand that.
Yeah.
I was like, the televisions looked different. The way they operated different, and the way the game was visually presented looks very different. And I made a video of doing a playthrough of that with some scan lines and some filters done so that it tries to mimic that CRT look as much as possible. When I showed it to him, he was like, it used to look like this. It was like, yeah, you used to be able to see like their eyes and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't look terrible.
Yeah.
And he was kind of getting into the way it looked. I don't know if you ever I ever finished that video or not, but I think it does put off a lot of people, because like if I try to get my kids to look at games, like old games, anything that's like pre PS3, they get very like, I don't want to look at that. It's terrible graphics. I'm like, yeah, you got to get past that stuff. Some of the best games made are older games. So but I think it does.
Yeah, no, I agree. The experience I've kind of had with this, again, I mentioned my podcast. One of my co-hosts, because it's quite funny. I'm kind of known for always bringing up Metal Gear Solid on this podcast, to the point where like they'll be like, "Oh, for God's sake, here he goes again." So one of my co-hosts, and he's a close friend of mine, was like, "Right, I'm gonna play the first Metal Gear Solid game. I want to see what this is all about. Why is this guy so obsessed with this series?" And so he played Metal Gear Solid 1, the original. And he came away and he was so disappointed. He said it just felt so dated in terms of the gameplay and the graphics, and it was so like, obviously, I was like, oh no, like I feel so so gutted that he really didn't like the game that much. He said like he liked the story and characters. He thought that was done well, but he just said it was just really hard to go back to that game. But then he started playing MGS2 and was like, oh, this game's really cool. Like, I really like the gameplay in this, and the graphics hold up pretty well. And I was kind of almost like, I wish, in some ways, I kind of wish I almost, and this is probably sacrilege among the fans, I directed him to the Twin Snakes, maybe.
You probably should have.
Yeah.
You probably should have done that.
Because
I've told people the same thing before.
Yeah. Because it does play more modernly than, whilst
the thing about the original game, I think, is that it's 3D, but it plays like a 2D game.
Yeah.
And you need to go in with that understanding, where like, because it was like the first 3D, and there were still like during that time period, nobody really knew how to make a good 3D game.
No.
And two flushes out a lot of those issues that popped up from the first game, the lessons learned on. So like a lot of people have a hard time because they see it visually 3D. They don't understand that you need to approach this as a 2D platform or a 2D action game.
That's right. Yeah, no, definitely. And that's why I think it will be interesting when we eventually do, and I think it is coming, when we do get a remake of Metal Gear Solid, the first one, for whatever console it'll be. I do wonder how they're gonna tackle the gameplay and level design. Like, are they gonna?
Yeah,
I think they should redesign a fair amount of it whilst keeping the essence of the original level design. I don't know what you think.
I mean, no, I don't. I think if they deviate too much from Shadow Moses, the actual structure itself, I think it's going to turn too many people off. It is too iconic of a building to mess with. What I think they could do is make the AI in the game way more realistic. And if they did that, it would balance out a lot of the easiness that would come from, like, say you take the Shadow Moses from Metal Gear Solid 4.
Yeah.
It looks great. And you gave it the movement from 5, but you gave each soldier almost an equivalent ability to see and move around as you. That makes that game substantially harder, and it offsets the issues that would be created from it not having a complex environment.
Do you think that's still so? Like the classic example with Twin Snakes is the Revolver Ocelot boss fight. How you can just shoot him in first person now, and it takes away from the whole having to run around that room. Do you think, like, how do you think that should be tackled in a remake?
Oh, I mean, in a remake, all you would have to do is just control the camera angle for that boss fight.
Okay.
You not give them the option to go to first person.
Yeah.
And then you can completely force them to do it the way that you want them to do it. I think they should have done that with the original Twin Snakes. I think that was a pretty big oversight.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Kind of taking away some of that ability. I guess that that's why I think the Metal Gear Solid 1 remake is such, like, I think we kind of mentioned it in your video, like, I don't envy the people having to do that, because you are treading on eggshells. Like, if you change too much, it upsets fans. If you keep it, what happened with Twin Snakes, if you just keep it shot for shot, but you add new mechanics, it upsets the fans. It's so hard to find the right balance of what you do with that remake. I've seen some people say, just make it, like, update the graphics, but keep it the same gameplay. Like, I've seen that argument before, and it's kind of like, I don't know, like, that could work, but will that bring newer generations of gamers in if they just see this kind of like top-down infiltration?
See, that's the slippery slope of the Metal Gear games, and each evolution of the games really dictate how the next game is going to play. And it's kind of really important to play the games in the order in which they were released, because if you don't do it that way and you try to jump back, say you start with 3 and then you go and play the old, like, Metal Gear 1 and 2, like, it's so jarring. It's such a weird thing. And that's kind of one of the I think the things that has to be overcome with the series is there has to be a way to make it so that people can approach the game and be able to expand on it, instead of saying, I played 5, I loved 5, but then you try to play 1, Metal Gear Solid 1, they're going to hate Metal Gear Solid 1.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I guess I can't wait. I can't wait to see what we'll get eventually. But it is it's a scary one. I think it's kind of like how are they going to do it, and how is it going to go down? And I always wonder, like, I don't think even like an amazing remake of Metal Gear Solid 1 will ever have the same impact of the original game. Just because.
Sorry, I bumped the mic.
That's all right, no worries. I think a big part of what makes Metal Gear Solid 1 so iconic is the time that it came out in. It's like that. There are so many things in that game which we hadn't experienced at the time. Cinematic level cutscenes, cinematic level voice acting, things like that. A lot of that, and I think I touched on this with Leafy Webster, is just the standard now. So what is gonna be the hook now?
Yeah, those standards, a lot of those standards that we see today are all set by these people who did all of these actions and figured out the best way of approaching this. And it's difficult for someone to understand that without the context of being there at the time.
Yeah, definitely.